Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 70, and we're going to cover Deuteronomy chapter 30 and 31. Last time we talked about Deuteronomy 29, and it's the famous verse 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and our sons forever, that we may observe all the words of this law. And we talked about the conundrum that God had put the people in. On one hand, he's telling them to keep a law that is practically impossible to keep. And on the other hand, he's telling them you need a new heart to do it. And so what this is causing Israel to do is say, how in the world do we accomplish this? You're giving a law that we can't keep. And then you're saying we need a new heart to keep it. We can't do any of these things. And God, through Moses, is like, yeah, I know the secret things belong to the Lord, but those that are revealed belong to you. And you see this tension, but God immediately relieves this tension. He's been doing it. He's been giving hints all throughout the law. And then in the very next chapter, in chapter 30, look at what it says. So it shall be when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all the nations where the Lord your God has banished you, you will return to the Lord your God and obey him with all of your heart and soul, according to all that I command you today. God says, listen, I've given you these blessings and curses, and if you disobey me, I'll banish you from the land. But he says, even if I banish you to the ends of the earth, if you repent and come back to me, I'll bring you back in. And he gives the solution here. And this is one of the most important verses in Deuteronomy. I put this verse up there with the Shema that we covered in Deuteronomy 6. This is Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. He says, moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul, so that you may live. This is the answer, ladies and gentlemen. God is saying, yeah, of course the law has an impossible standard, because it was never meant to save you. It was meant to preserve your life, to keep you alive, to protect you, to keep you from dying, to establish order. And in that order, it was meant to teach you of your sin. And in teaching your sin, it was meant to shepherd you to Christ. I've set up things perfectly, and it was meant to humble you for you to cry out to me. But you can have two responses. You can hate me for the law and say this is unfair, or you can worship me because of it. Because I've not only given you hardship, the hardship was to point you to the provision. And look at what he addressed this in verse 11. He says, for this commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who shall cross the sea for us and get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, so that you may observe it. So God is saying, I've given you the solution. The word is very near to you. You don't have to cross the sea to get it. You don't have to cross the mountains or go up to heaven or go down to Sheol to find this truth. The truth is readily available to you. If I could say it another way, the gospel is found in the law. It was in Genesis 3:15, and we've seen it several times by way of example and stated explicitly. God says you need a new heart, and we get one of our most explicit verses here in Deuteronomy 6. God says, listen, you cannot do this. I have to do this. God has to do this. And he shows them and gives them the solution. And now with that, it goes back to man's responsibility. God said, look, I've given you a glimpse into the divine counsel, into my mind, looking at what I'm accomplishing from my perspective, and the glimpse from the manward responsibility, from the commands and the way you see things. Now, I've given you everything you need. I've shown you that there are secrets that only belong to me that will always remain incomprehensible. But I've revealed things that belong to you, which you can act on. And so they have everything they need, which makes verse 15 make sense. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, and death and adversity. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land where you are entering to possess it. If your heart turns away and you will not obey, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you will surely perish. You will not prolong your days in the land where you are crossing the Jordan to enter to possess it. So God says, I've set before you blessings and cursings, life and death. Choose life. And then we get the last counsel from Moses in chapter 31. Moses says, look, I'm 120 years old. I'm not able to enter the land because the Lord told me you shall not cross this Jordan. But he's reminding Joshua to be strong and courageous. And what's the best way to remind a person to be strong and courageous? That is to remind them of history. And Moses always leans on that. He reminds them of the history of God's faithfulness. And we have to take note of that. You won't always have a miracle readily accessible to you. God isn't going to say, oh, hey, you forgot that I was faithful. Let me remind you of that. Here's a miracle right here to jog your memory. No, God doesn't move like that. He says, I did it in the past. Take note of it and meditate on it and remember it. That would be your fuel and your encouragement to get through tough and difficult moments. So, practical application today. Let's stop asking God for a miracle and to move in our lives. He's training the next leader to follow him, and he's telling him, don't search for a miracle. Remember history, and that is your miracle to get you through the toughest, most difficult moments in life. Moses tells Joshua to be strong and courageous. So in verse 14, during the commissioning of Joshua, Moses said something very telling, and let's reveal that. Verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, time for your death is near. Call Joshua and present yourself at the tent of meeting that I may commission him. The Lord appeared in the tent, and a pillar of cloud stood at the doorway of the tent. The Lord said to Moses, behold, you're about to lie down with your fathers, and this people will arise and play the harlot with the strange gods of the land, in the midst of which they are going, and will forsake me and break my covenant which I made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed, and many evils and troubles will come upon them. So God is predicting Israel's future. He's saying, look, you're not going to obey me. I've given you the solution. I've set the choice before you, and you're going to choose death. You're going to choose curses. And he's already given not only Moses, but Joshua the playbook. And they knew this already. Remember when we were going into the land? What did Reuben, Simeon, and the half tribe of Manasseh say? Oh, y'all crossing the Jordan? Oh, we'll go over there and help you fight, but we want to stay on this side. We started seeing that already. Remember what they said? Your sins will find you out. And here it is. God is taking it a step further. He's calling them out and telling leadership what exactly will happen to them. And I think it's something very telling here. Guess what God will say that they will say? In verse 17, it says, so that they will say in that day, is it not because our God is not among us that these evils have come upon us? Man, isn't that telling? That's the disposition of us all. Calamity hits, when trials hit, when we're struggling with sin struggles and going through things, what do we say? God isn't with us. Some people go all in and say, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm done with him. But that's not the conclusion in the statement of most people. Most people are going to say, man, I've read the scriptures. I know he's holy. I know he's real. I know this world wasn't created by an accident. It was created by an intelligent mind. And I've come to believe that that mind is Yahweh. And I know he's all powerful and all knowing, but he's against me. He's not for me anymore. That's why I'm going through the things that I'm going through. God predicts this. And so this should help us out. God is already telling us what we're going to say when we believe he's not there or showing up in our lives. So why wouldn't we come to God in authenticity and tell him, God, you told me I would feel this way. Help me to unfeel this way. Help me to not feel these feelings that I'm feeling toward you, because you told me you were for me. You told me that I'm a treasured possession. You told me that you will fight for me. You told me that you will turn good to evil. And now I'm sitting here saying, our God is not amongst us. God says in verse 21, I know what's in their hearts. I know their intent, which they are developing today. God says, you all are already scheming. You already are moving away from me even before I have brought you into the land. And so he tells Moses to write this song that would be a constant rebuke against them, where when they do fall into this deep, dark sin, this song will constantly testify and be a witness against them. And look at what Moses says here in verse 27. This is a dagger here. He says, for I know your rebellion and your stubbornness. Behold, while I am still alive with you today, you have been rebellious against the Lord. Verse 29, for I know that after my death, you will act corruptedly and turn from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, and you will do that which is evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger with the works of your hand. Moses predicts it. He says, look, this second generation, I see that you're on fire for God. That's the buzzword, isn't it? I'm on fire for God. I'm ready to run through a brick wall for God. Listen, we can have fireworks for the Lord, and you can start off in a blaze of glory, but you can also end up in a puff of smoke. And that emotion means nothing. And we're going to see the culmination of this just in 2 books. Judges. Judges is going to be one of the lowest points in Israel, and it doesn't take long to get there. Just 2 generations removed from Moses. This is Moses' grandkids and great-grandkids. And this is sad. This shows us if we're not vigilant, if we don't fight for our families and fight for our disciples and fight for our church, in 1 or 2 generations, Satan will completely undo everything that's been done. And granted, we can't control the consciences and the central nervous systems of other people. We can't make them obey the Lord, but we can do what Moses did. We can set the next generation up for success and not failure, and not allow the blood to be on our hands. And if our children and our children's children move away from the Lord, may it be in spite of us, in spite of our training, not because of it. I pray that you all have the circumcised heart that Moses speaks of here in Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. I pray to the Lord of heaven, circumcise the hearts of all of the listeners of this podcast. Make them true, genuine believers. And if they are, give them the ministry of reconciliation to make disciples. And through the words of their lips, may many hearts be circumcised, because they're able to present the gospel accurately and not only preach a good gospel, but to have a matured model of making a disciple fully and not leaving them vulnerable to the wicked one. Let's continue to do this work of faithfulness, and maybe God will circumcise many hearts through our ministries. Don't go change the world, brothers and sisters. Just simply man your post, bloom where you're planted, and let the Lord use you. His name is El Roy, and that is the God who sees. You don't have to move out of state for him to see you. You don't have to get a huge following for him to see you. You just have to be faithful where you are. Let that be enough. Find contentment in that, and surely God will bless you. You guys take care.